Senator.
Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. Welcome, Ms. Bondi.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for meeting with me. I greatly appreciate that.
It was a pleasure. Ms. Bondi, you were a courtroom prosecutor for a great many years. As a courtroom prosecutor, did you ever have an enemies list?
No, Senator.
And you went on to be Florida's Attorney General. As Florida's Attorney General, did you ever have an enemies list?
No, Senator.
As Florida's Attorney General, you were responsible for hiring into the Florida Department of Attorney General, correct?
Senator, the Attorney General's office in Florida is the third largest in the state, approximately 1,400 employees and approximately 400 lawyers. Only California and Texas are our bigger offices.
And you were responsible
yes.
for hiring into that office while you were Attorney General?
Yes.
Would you
Senator.
have hired someone into the Florida Attorney General's office who you knew had an enemies list?
Senator, to cut to the chase, you're clearly talking about Kash Patel. I don't believe he has an enemies list. He made a quote on TV, which I have not heard. I saw your sign, or Senator Durbin's sign, about Kash. But I know that Kash Patel has had 60 jury trials as a public defender, as a prosecutor. He has great experience in the Intel Department, Department of Defense. I have known Kash, and I believe that Kash is the right person at this time for this job. You'll have the ability to question Mr. Patel.
And I'm questioning you right now
do.
about whether you will enforce an enemies list that he announced publicly on television.
Oh, Senator, I'm sorry. There will never be an enemies list within the Department of Justice.
Thank you. The FBI's, what is the FBI's role in national security and counterterrorism, and how important is that role?
You know, Senator, I believe now more than ever, counterterrorism is so important and vital in our country. We are facing such incredible threats here and abroad. I'm sure many of you saw former FBI Director Wray's interview on 60 Minutes. He talked about the threats that, frankly, again, I don't have my security clearance, but the threats facing us, Senator, from China right now that are so great, the sleeper cells within our country.
Given that importance, is it responsible to call for shutting down the FBI's counterterrorism and national security work? And will you, as Attorney General, impede or shut down the FBI's counterterrorism and national security work?
Senator,
2 questions.
Senator, I believe that national security is vital right now for our country on so many fronts. I could continue to discuss many others.
And the FBI's role in that?
And the FBI plays a vital role in counterterrorism
which you
throughout
will
our
or will
world.
not shut down.
I will look at each agency. I have no intention of shutting anything down right now, Senator. I am not in that office yet, and if confirmed, I will look at each individual agency and how it should be managed, but counterterrorism right now in our world is vital.
You have said that Department of Justice prosecutors will be prosecuted in the Trump administration. What Department of Justice prosecutors will be prosecuted and why?
I said that on TV. I said prosecutors will be prosecuted, to finish the quote, if bad. Investigators will be investigated. You know, we all take an oath, Senator, to uphold the law. None of us are above the law. Let me give you a really good example of a bad lawyer within the Justice Department, a guy named Klein Smith, who altered a FISA warrant, one of the most important things we can do in this country. So will everyone be held to an equal, fair system of justice if I am the next Attorney General? Absolutely. And no one is above the law.
Under what circumstances will you prosecute journalists for what they write?
I believe in the freedom of speech. Only if anyone commits a crime. It's pretty basic, Senator, with anything, with any victim. And this goes back to my entire career for 18 years as a prosecutor and then 8 years as Florida's Attorney General. You find the facts of the case, you apply the law in good faith, and you treat everyone fairly.
And it would not be appropriate for a prosecutor to start with a name and look for a crime. It's a prosecutor's job to start with a crime and look for a name, correct?
Senator, I think that is the whole problem with the weaponization that we have seen the last 4 years and what's been happening to Donald Trump. They targeted Donald Trump. They went after him, actually starting back in 2016. They targeted his campaign. They have launched countless investigations against him. That will not be the case if I am Attorney General. I will not politicize that office. I will not target people simply because of their political affiliation. Justice will be administered even-handedly throughout this country. Senator, we've got to bring this country back together. We've got to move forward, or we're going to lose our country.
Yeah, I think the concern is that weaponization of the Justice Department may well occur under your tenure. And we want to make sure that that's not the case, that you remain independent, that you remain able to and willing to tell the president no when that's necessary to protect the Constitution and the integrity of the department. So that's where I'm asking these questions. We talked in the meeting about the contacts policy that has prevailed really since Senator Hatch sat in that chair and demanded it of the Clinton Justice Department through all the administration since then, with the exception of a brief period under Attorney General Gonzalez, which he corrected and which did not end well for him. There has been a contacts policy that limits contacts between the White House and the Department of Justice to a very few senior officials on each side. In your role as Attorney General, if you are confirmed, will you maintain, defend, and enforce that longstanding contacts policy?
Senator, yes, I will meet with White House counsel, and I will meet with the appropriate officials and follow the contacts policy.
My time has expired. Thank you, Ms. Bondi.
Senator Cornyn. Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to try to fit in 2 questions in my 4 minutes. Lindsay, stick around because I'm going to say something nice about you. First, yes to 230. We've got to really work on that. There's a lot of support for fixing 230, in fact, outright repealing 230 in this committee. First question. Presumably, your commitment to fairly enforcing the law based on facts and evidence would also apply to environmental cases.
Yes, Senator.
I'm concerned because, under Trump, criminal prosecutions for pollution dropped sharply in his first term. And you will be running an Environment and Natural Resources Division that has things like, for instance, a methane task force that big polluters who spent big money to get President Trump reelected don't like. And they're going to be coming to you to say, hey, we don't want a whole lot of enforcement on this. Methane leaks, carbon dioxide leaks, it's a pollutant, polluting our water, polluting our air. Will you be strong when that happens?
Senator, if you haven't learned yet, I'm pretty strong and I'm pretty independent. And I think you and I spoke about this in your office a bit. I don't know a lot about that issue, but I am committed to meeting with the ENRD division and talking to you about it. I wish I knew more about the issue you faced, but I don't. But I'm committed to absolutely looking at it and doing what I can to help you in your state.
I don't want environmental prosecutions to be an ignored stepchild subset. It's law just like any other law. The second question that I'd like to get to goes back to Chairman Grassley's opening comments, that it's going to be really important for the Department of Justice, under your leadership, to answer questions from senators, both Republican and Democrat, and to give us real answers. Sometimes the best oversight comes from the other party. And indeed, sometimes the best oversight comes from one senator who sticks to one issue and persists at it without necessarily support from the rest of the committee. And that oversight has been really consequential in the past, and it's really important. So Chairman Grassley has been very good about trying to enforce that rule. And I want to tell you just a quick story about something that went the wrong way, I believe. Crossfire Hurricane was mentioned by Senator Graham. There was a committee investigation into Crossfire Hurricane. During that Crossfire Hurricane investigation, box loads of material was provided by the department and the Bureau to Senate Republicans. They got files, they got investigative reports, they got internal memos, they got stuff that would not be FOIA-able. They really were able to do a deep dive because they got everything they asked for, even stuff that the FBI would ordinarily not produce. That was happening on that side of the aisle. For me, I had questions about Justice Kavanaugh's supplemental background investigation. And I asked for things like, what is the Department of Justice policy for how tip lines work? That's a FOIA-able question. I didn't get a single piece of paper. I asked for things like, what are the ground rules for investigations of supplemental background investigations? I didn't get a single piece of paper. Senator Graham called the Deputy Attorney General up into his office to say, will you guys please knock it off and give this guy some information? So, you know, I have lived the example of, if you're a Republican on this committee in a Republican administration, you get everything you ask for and more. And if you're a Democrat, you get zero. That was not a great moment for me and not a great moment for the department. And so I will take the chairman at his word that he wants the department to be responsive to requests from all of us. And I would ask you, will you be responsive to all of us, irrespective of our party affiliation, if we are asking legitimate questions that you have the power to answer?
Senator, I think I've said that from the beginning. Yes, especially on Freedom of Information Act, I will follow the laws that apply to the Freedom of Information Act. I believe in that. I actually dealt with the public records when I was a state prosecutor. It's been so long ago, I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah.
So I handled all the public records.
One just sort of point of order here. The FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act process is one thing. Anybody can get information under the Freedom of Information Act process. As senators, we should be able to do better than that. When we're doing worse than that, that's a sign that somebody's hiding something. When we're doing better than that, that's a good thing for congressional oversight. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Tillis.
Can we take a minute off Senator Schiff, since I'm joking? Since he took an extra minute, I'm joking.
Yes, you can. You wanted to say something to Senator Schiff?
No, sir, I asked if we could take a minute off Senator Schiff since Senator Whitehouse
went
took an
over by a
extra
minute.
minute. I was teasing. I'm sorry.
Okay. Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bondi,
I'll turn it over to the ranking member.
Thanks. Before I get to my questions, if you'd be kind enough to entertain a unanimous consent request to put
Yes.
certain documents into the record. Okay. I will not put this beast into the record, spare everybody that, but I will be circulating it to your offices. I would like to put into the record the cover article from the Economist magazine from this April, warning of the next housing disaster from that climate risk to insurance to
Without
mortgages,
objection.
property values cascade. And we put a lot of work into this when I was chair of the Budget Committee, and I'd also like to put in the report summarizing the evidence we adduced in the Budget Committee on the same insurance crisis.
Without objection.
I have also a letter here from CREW, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, regarding the Zeldin nomination.
Without objection.
And finally, I have a letter dated January 15, 2025, submitted by the Climate Action Campaign and signed by over 70 environmental organizations concerning the nomination.
Without objection.
Great. Thank
So
you
ordered,
very much,
yes.
Chairman. Mr. Zeldin, welcome. As we discussed when we met, I said I was going to ask you some really basic, no-tricks questions about climate change. So let me just start with those. First, as a matter of law, is carbon dioxide a pollutant?
Thank you, Senator, and I enjoyed our meeting with your team as well, and I look forward to working with all of you. As far as carbon dioxide emitted from you during that question, I would say no. As far as carbon dioxide that is admitted in larger masses that we hear concern about from scientists as well as from Congress. That's something that certainly needs to be focused on for the EPA.
And as a matter of law, it is a designated pollutant, correct?
Senator, while carbon dioxide is not named as one of the 6 in the Clean Air Act, the EPA has been treating it as such.
Yeah, because of a Supreme Court decision that said so, correct?
Correct, yes, Senator.
What effect, briefly and in layman terms, I know you're not a scientific expert, what effect are carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuel combustion having in the atmosphere?
Senator, while I am someone who believes strongly that we should work with the scientists, leaving the science to the scientists, the policy to the policymakers, and that we all work together. I don't sit before you as a scientist. Fortunately, at EPA, we do have many talented scientists who provide that research. They have that talent to be able to tell us exactly what the metrics are of their research.
Just generally and in layman's terms, what effects do these carbon dioxide emissions have when they enter the atmosphere?
Trapping heat, Senator.
And what effect, again, briefly and in layman's terms, does methane leakage from fossil fuel production and transport have in the atmosphere?
Same.
Heat trapping also. And what effect, I'm from the ocean state, so I've got to ask this one, what effect are carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuel combustion having in the oceans?
Well, the emissions of greenhouse gases trap heat, Senator. As far as your concern that you expressed at the onset of your testimony as you showed that map of Rhode Island, and as you suggested, and as I mentioned, as I represented the district on the east end of Long Island, rising sea levels are concerns where I'm from as well. And it's one of the reasons why the federal government, through the Army Corps, had to invest in a Army Corps of Engineer project with the revetment of Montauk Lighthouse, with fear that if we did not do that, that Montauk Lighthouse, and due to erosion, would be collapsing into the ocean.
Is it correct that the trapped heat from carbon dioxide emissions and methane in the atmosphere is heating up the oceans? In fact, 90% of the heat goes into the oceans, and that is what is producing the sea level rise you just discussed.
That is what the scientists tell me, Senator.
Yep. And are the oceans also absorbing about 30% of the carbon dioxide itself, and therefore chemically turning more acid in measurable and clear ways?
Senator, as far as any specific numbers, I have to defer to the research of the scientists.
But generally that is happening.
Yes,
There
sir.
is a link between the fossil fuel emissions and the acidification of the oceans.
Yes, Senator, I do understand that there's litigation here that, to a certain extent, I'm not going to be able to comment on as EPA administrator, but to the general question, yes, Senator.
Yeah. Have we hit the 1.5 degree risk threshold, and why is that important?
Senator, again, as far as being able, throughout today's hearing, to be able to personally be citing and confirming specific numbers, that is something where I have to defer to the talented scientists to be able to provide that advice on an ongoing basis, whether or not we're hitting numbers at any given time.
If you are confirmed, what are the key either climate or oceans tipping points that would concern you?
As far as the tipping point, well, Senator, I think that as you put up a map of your district, I could, and your state, I could put up a map of mine, and we could do this across the entire country. As long as that concern exists, where there is in fact rising sea levels, and I hear it from both sides of the aisle. Senator Collins spoke about it in the context of Maine.
One last question before my time runs out. I'm sorry. Are we now on a pathway to climate safety, or do we need to do more to reduce carbon emissions in order to get on that pathway?
Senator, the United States emissions have been going down over the course of the last couple of decades. Unfortunately, there are other countries where it is not going in the same direction. And I would say that we will have never done enough to ensure that our water and our air is clean, safe, and healthy. Whatever we do every day to achieve this objective, we need to wake up the next day looking for ways to do more.
we had in my office. I understand that colleagues have already raised the urgency of more sanctions on Russia's shadow fleet, particularly as it is sabotaging our allies' infrastructure in the Baltic, and urged that it is unfair for Chinese manufacturers to be able to underprice U.S. manufacturers by virtue of lower environmental standards. So I just want to give two big thumbs ups to both of those notions. As we talked about in my office, I think that the most immediate danger of a major economic collapse is going to come through the insurance industry. We're seeing signs of it in Florida already. The fires in LA are making it worse out in California, but it's occurring nationwide. And as we discussed, where you can't get insurance, you can't get mortgages, where you can't get mortgages, you can't sell properties at value, and that cascades, according to the chief economist of Freddie Mac, into a 2008-style massive economic recession. So I would like to ask first that you get somebody on your team to take a look at this report, which I'd ask to put into the record, from the Senate Budget Committee while I was chairing it, on the non-renewals, price increases, and unavailability problem county by county across the country. And if somebody on your team looks at it and can give you a summary, I would be grateful. And I would actually ask you personally to read this Economist magazine article. I don't think it's complicated.
No, Senator Whitehouse, you gave it to me in your office, and I did read it.
Good.
So
all right, so we're ahead of you. So I just want to make sure.
I will point out to my children behind me, doing your homework's important.
It is important, and thank you for doing that. I think you're the first person in a nominations hearing who's actually done the reading that has been proposed. So I just think that all of us need to be alert to this problem. I think it's actually started. Ernest Hemingway famously said that bankruptcies happen gradually and then suddenly. I think we're in gradually on a climate change-driven insurance crisis that will cascade out into the whole economy. I gave my Environment Public Works colleagues a book this thick. I gave your team a similar book of all the many high-level, serious, peer-reviewed studies that have shown these economic risks. And I just don't think we're ready for it. And I think it's really important that we be ready for it. And I don't want anybody to say that they weren't warned about it. So there's my warning. Last question to you, and I'm going to be treading into an area where I don't know a thing because I just heard about this morning, and I've been the ranking member in the EPW noms hearing. So what I did read this morning is that the manner in which you have structured your partnership has enabled you to avoid the payment of nearly $1 million in Medicare taxes, and that the IRS has taken the position that the manner in which you structured your partnership to avoid those Medicare taxes does not actually support avoiding Medicare taxes. And it's probably more complicated of an issue than you and I are going to get through in the next 1 minute and 13 seconds. So we'll follow up with a question for the record. But I just think that when we're dealing with these massive issues of income inequality and threats to Medicare and all of the concerns that I think actually helped propel President Trump to the presidency, it would be extremely awkward if the Secretary of the Treasury were taking advantage of a supposed avoidance mechanism that the IRS, which you oversee, has determined actually doesn't produce that result. And somehow those things need to come into alignment. I don't know why. I suppose the easiest thing would be to go back and pay the Medicare taxes. But again, this is way more complicated than you and I can dispose of in the next half minute. But I do think it's important. I think it's really important to send a message as an incoming Treasury Secretary that everything you do with respect to your personal taxes aligns with IRS guidance.
Senator White, thank you for the question. So it is the firm's taxes, and we are up to date on all our taxes. This matter is in not by us, but it is in continuing litigation. If confirmed, I have agreed to shutter my firm, and I have also informed the ranking member and the chairman that I will provision the amount that is lower than the amount that was stated in the press release that went out last night, and I will hold that until till the case makes its way through the courts. So once
Well, that seems like an attentive response to the problem, and I'm glad you respected this actually is a problem that needs to be attended to. So thank you.
Thank you. And Senator Wyden has asked if he could add one final question. You get the last one, Senator Wyden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I gathered that.
Senator Whitehouse.
Chairman, and welcome to the seat recently occupied by myself. I'm delighted to see you there and look forward to working with you.
Me too.
Mr. Vogt, the backdrop to the conversation we're having here is indicated by this graph, which shows from 1980 to 2020 how income has grown in the United States. The bottom line, showing essentially no income growth, is the bottom 20% of income earners. And as you can see, their household income has stayed essentially flat. The second line up, this lower one, is how the top 1% of income earners have done. They're up 600% nearly, compared to near 0% for the working people in that lowest 20%. And if you look at the topmost line, that's up more than 800%, that's the top 0.01%. What worries me as we go into this effort is that what we're trying to produce is a golden age for fat cats, billionaires, and polluters that is going to make this discrepancy worse and worse and worse. And it is in that context that I would like to ask you some questions about these executive orders. President Trump fired off 26 executive orders, I believe, his first day. Are you familiar with them?
I'm getting familiar with them, Senator. I've been trying to stay abreast to them and read them. I haven't read through all of them, but I'm aware that he has been very active, and I've been reading a number of them. Did
you have any role in preparing any of them?
Senator, that's part of the deliberative process that the transition goes through, and I'm not going to invade that deliberative process.
Wait. Hold. Can I have a point of order here and stop the clock? I was the chairman, you can put that down now, for a Congress in which we had, I think, over 40 hearings. And in those hearings, never once did I tell a Republican colleague what questions they could or could not ask. Those are kind of not my business. And we had some pretty out there questions, I will tell you. And we certainly never had a witness tell senators what questions they could and could not ask. So I guess I'm like, why can I not get an answer? Is there some new rule in this committee as to where these executive orders came from? That's perfectly, to me, legitimate congressional oversight. And over, this witness has told us what questions he will answer. But the oath he took was to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in response to our questions. So if there's some new limitation about what question I can answer, I would like to understand that. If not, I'd like to have the chair tell the witness to answer my questions.
Well, as I understand it, there's no attorney-client privilege here, right? Or you're not claiming an attorney-client?
I'm not claiming a privilege, Senator.
Okay, yeah, well, you're not part of the administration. Generally speaking, you know, I guess the question is, did you advise on executive orders and which ones? Is that the question? Yeah. Can you kind of tell us that, please, if you could?
Senator, I was not a member of the transition. I was not a member of the president's campaign.
Do you have knowledge of where the executive orders were drafted?
I don't have a comprehensive knowledge of where the executive orders
Do you
were
have any
drafted.
knowledge of where the executive orders were drafted? Do you know, for instance, if some of them came out of language from the Center for Renewing America, or some of them came out of Project 2025, or some of them came out of the Heritage Institute, or some of them came out of the American Petroleum Institute? Do you know an answer to those questions?
I can't imagine they came from Project 2025. The president disassociated himself repeatedly from that. But no, I can't give you a
not really.
comprehensive answer with regard to where the executive orders were compiled. My assumption is that they were compiled within the transition.
Well, we will see, because I think there's every reason to believe that they came from special interests and lobbyists, and we'll pursue that. Let me ask you about a letter that you wrote some time ago on Center for Renewing America letterhead to the Judicial Conference. I think it's the only letter that you ever wrote to the Judicial Conference. It was dated December 18th, 2023, and it goes into a certain amount of detail about the Ethics in Government Act and about Justice Jackson's financial disclosure forms. Did you do the research for this letter into the Ethics in Government Act and into the judicial financial disclosure forms personally?
Senator Art Center did the research on that.
And who in your center did the research on that?
Our center did the research on that, and I can't speak to who did the work specifically on it.
You don't know?
No, I didn't say that, Senator. I said it's not.
Why can't you speak to that? There's no privilege about that.
No, but a think tank is a public policy organization that has a decision to note who does the work on something and who doesn't do the work on it. And I stand by that letter. I haven't read it in some time. I'm happy to look at it. But I am aware that we sent it, that I signed it.
Did Mr. Paoletta, who is here, have a role in preparing this letter?
He's a member of the Center for Renewing America, but I'm not going to speak beyond that.
Here we go again, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to speak. I'm not going to answer questions. My
He
time is
said
up.
he stands by the letter. It's his letter. I don't
That's
care
not the
what-
question.
Yeah, well, he just said
That's
it.
not the question. My time is up.
All right, thanks.
Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Kennedy, I only have 5 minutes with you, and I've got a lot of experience with CMS, so you're just going to have to listen. Two things. One, if you want to move from advocacy to public responsibility, Americans are going to need to hear a clear and trustworthy recantation of what you have said on vaccinations, including a promise from you never to say vaccines aren't medically safe when they in fact are, and making indisputably clear that you support mandatory vaccinations against diseases where that will keep people safe. You're in that hole pretty deep. We've just had a measles case in Rhode Island, the first since 2013, and frankly, you frighten people. Two, I want to air harms that Rhode Island has experienced from a remorseless, senseless CMS bureaucracy. CMS has for years maintained a reimbursement system that the bureaucracy could never explain, never justify, that persistently pays Rhode Island providers less than neighboring Massachusetts and Connecticut providers, a differential of 23 and 26% in our regional healthcare market. The Pending Ahead program can begin to remedy this, at least for value-based care, and it must. There has to be payment parity in the region. Rhode Island's healthcare system is bleeding out because we aren't paid what neighboring hospitals and doctors are paid. And the one act CMS took on this years ago was to make it worse. The CMS bureaucracy has also attacked one of the best accountable care organizations in the country, Rhode Island's Integra Family Doctors. Tried to throw them off the shared savings program because they said Integra years ago briefly fell 137 patients short of the 5,000 patients that ACOs need. CMS wouldn't listen until a court found that to be unjustified, likely illegal, irreparable harm to this high-performing ACO and its patients, and contrary to the public interest. That must stop. Last, CMS has refused to approve waivers granted elsewhere for Rhode Island from rules that are stupid for Medicare patients who are nearing the end of their days. Here's what families see. Granny is home dying. She needs to transfer to a nursing home, and Medicare insists on putting her 3 days and 2 nights in a hospital. Expensive, frightening to Granny and the family, and stupid. Granny's home dying and can't get palliative and curative care together. Inhumane and stupid. Granny's home dying and can't get home care if she can still get out into the yard or be driven to see the shore, to see Narragansett Beach, say, one more time, to recall childhood memories before she dies. Inhumane and stupid. Granny's home dying and the family's exhausted. And the respite care benefit is not to send a nurse or a caregiver, but to stuff Granny in an ambulance and haul her off to a hospital. Some respite. It's all expensive, frightening, inhumane, and stupid. But the insensate CMS bureaucracy takes a court order to be awakened to the harm they cause. I have had enough. CMS should let Rhode Island try humane end-of-life care through CMMI. Let's see if it works at a state. I bet it will save money, serve families better at a very, very delicate time, and perhaps even make a model for better health care everywhere. I've said a lot. My time is out. You're welcome to respond in writing. I ask unanimous consent that the order declaring CMS's actions to constitute irreparable and illegal harm be put into the record.
Without objection.
Let me just respond very briefly, Senator Whitehouse. I'm an implacable enemy of tyrannical, insensate bureaucracies and stupid rules, and I will work with you to make CMS responsive to the needs of Rhode Island and to remedy those disparities that you talk about. I am familiar with the Integra Health plan, and it is the template for what we ought to be doing is a value-based plan, and I look forward to you to making sure that we create pilot programs like this.
Unfortunately, Mr. Chairman,
around the country.
Unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, one of the things I've learned in my tenure in the Senate is that a nominee saying that they're willing to work with me amounts to exactly zero. We need to get this fixed. Thank you.
Well, I guess at that point, then, we will move on to Senator Daines.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Coons?
No.
Mr. Blumenthal?
No.
Ms. Verona? No. Mr. Booker?
No by proxy.
Mr. Padilla?
No.
Mr. Welch? No. Mr. Schitt?
No.
Chairman Chairman Grassley?
Aye.
On this vote, the ayes are 12, the nays are 10.
What is it? Okay. The nominee, 12 to 10, Yeah, the nomination will be favorably reported. Now we'll call on Senator Cornyn. Do you want to speak?
No, thank you.
Okay. Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you very much. Attorney General Bondi was clearly an engaging witness. She was also clearly the twice elected Attorney General of her home state. And she said a lot of the right things. But the question for me that she faced was, if Trump asked her to do something illegal or unconstitutional, would she be capable to say no? That was the key question for me. And what I noticed as she testified here is that whenever she got into an area where there was a Trump sensitivity, it was like watching a plane fly into the Bermuda Triangle and all the navs and comms go suddenly haywire. During her hearing, she refused to acknowledge that President Trump lost the 2020 election. And we've just heard in the Budget Committee, the OMB director claimed that it was rigged. So this is a recurring theme in Trump land. She claimed there was a peaceful transfer of power in 2021, part of the effort to erase January 6th. She refused to agree that there is presently no predication to investigate Special Counsel Jack Smith or Chair Liz Cheney. She defended Kash Patel, claiming, "I don't believe he has an enemies list," except that Patel had posted the list to social media with the caption, and I'm quoting his caption here, "Names named, roadmap unveiled, the manhunt starts tomorrow." If that's not an enemies list, I do not know what is. Will she be a restraint on this character if he becomes the FBI director? This guy also posted a video on social media showing him taking a chainsaw to members of his enemies list. Reposted by Kash Patel. We already see DOJ's independence under attack. People are being cleared out for doing assigned work that their senior members had told them they had to do. Career section chiefs at ENRD, the people with the skills to push back against polluters, have been reassigned or suspended to make it easier for polluters to violate environmental laws. It is getting to be a strange and dangerous time. Just one example was the Trump pardons of the violent offenders January 6th, which we were told would be hard to believe, even absurd, wouldn't happen. We were told that Republican senators were against it for people who assaulted cops, threw stuff at cops, broke down doors, broke windows. We were told if you committed violence, obviously, you shouldn't be pardoned. That by the now vice president. We were told that he's going to focus on all the people who didn't commit any violence. And we were told that when you pardon people who attack police officers, you're sending the wrong signal. But despite all of that, that is precisely what he did. He now has an army on the streets of people who have proven themselves willing to commit political violence at his behest, while also pulling back security protection for his perceived enemies. How violent are the people he pardoned? Well, it hasn't been long since the pardon, and one's already been arrested. Another has been killed in a shootout in an armed confrontation with police officers. One already incarcerated for an armed standoff with police was pardoned while in prison. This is not normal. It's just one example of the way things are going. And somewhere, somehow someone has to have the spine to say no. And I have regrettably concluded, based on watching that airplane spin into the Trump-Bermuda Triangle, that Pam Bondi will not be that person, so that is why I voted no.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley. As I've said in a number of confirmation hearings, when I consider whether to vote.
Thanks, Chairman. Welcome, Mr. Patel. I remember January 6th. Colleagues running through our halls to flee the mob, colleagues shouting that rioters should be shot, us returning to our constitutional business through hallways cleared for us by automatic weapons carrying SWAT teams. None of you, none of us, said those violent rioters should be pardoned. A Republican colleague said such pardons would be hard to believe, even absurd. Your former colleague, J.D. Vance, said the violent rioters should not be pardoned. Even Jim Jordan said pardons would, and I quote, focus on all the people who didn't commit any violence. Well, Trump pardoned all of them. And there's a lesson in that. Every time you think Trump would never go that far, rethink that. We all seem to agree that violence against police is unacceptable, yet more than 600 people who physically attacked Capitol Police officers were just put back on the street, part of a 1,500-person personal Trump army, now out there with people who have proven themselves willing to do violence on Trump's call. In only 10 days, some are already back committing crimes. We've also tried as a committee, together, to address the dangers of illicit drug sales over the internet, and I assume we're all against murder for hire. But Trump also just pardoned a dark web operator sentenced to life in prison for trafficking illegal drugs online and accused of soliciting murders for hire. Those pardons, as Mr. Patel has said, are a mistake, but they are also a signal that we are entering a strange and dangerous time. That is the context for today's hearing. Warnings that the FBI could become Trump's enforcer, use the powers of law enforcement to stifle speech and dissent, punish political rivals of either party, and hand out free passes, get out of jail free cards to violent supporters are warnings we should heed. Here are some warnings of this nominee's Trump administration colleagues. Former Attorney General Bill Barr said, this nominee has virtually no experience that would qualify him to serve at the highest level of the world's preeminent law enforcement agency, end quote, and we would never be able to command the respect necessary to run the day-to-day operations of the Bureau. That's for the deputy position. Former CIA Director Gina Haspel was reported threatening to resign rather than have this nominee serve under her. John Bolton, Trump's former national security advisor, said, I didn't think he was qualified. I was forced to hire him. Trump's deputy national security advisor, the nominee's former supervisor, said, his ideas are ludicrous. He's absolutely unqualified for this job. He's untrustworthy. And it's an absolute disgrace to even consider an individual of this nature. That's from Republican appointees who worked with him. And here's what this nominee himself has said about using his office to prosecute journalists. We will go out and find the conspirators, not just in government, but in the media. We're going to come after you, whether it's criminally or civilly. Is that a correct quotation, Mr. Patel?
Senator, that's a partial quotation.
But it's correct.
In part.
Regarding his publication of his enemies list, Mr. Patel proclaimed, the manhunt starts tomorrow. and reposted a video depicting him taking a chainsaw to his political enemies. Is that you, Kash Patel, reposting that at the top of that page?
Senator, I had nothing to do with the creation of that meme.
Is that you reposting it, was my question.
And that's me at the top.
You said FBI agents were responsible for the violence on January 6th, and I quote you here, beyond a reasonable doubt. Is that what you said?
That's completely incorrect, and I appreciate the opportunity to address that.
I'll give you an opportunity in writing, but this is my time now.
Have at it.
An Inspector Attorney General investigation found that that was false. And you said we should impeach judges who rule against Donald Trump, who are, in your words, political terrorists. When this nominee tries to explain all this away, keep one thing in mind. He's testified under oath before a Colorado judge who presided over a Trump case in which he was a witness. And the judge found, and I'm quoting here, he was not a credible witness. His testimony is not only illogical, but completely devoid of any evidence in the record. That's from a judge. This is a dangerous time, and I ask all my colleagues to consider whether these plain comments by this person and by his own Trump administration colleagues should be given a blind eye, just overlooked, or whether, like the warnings of pardoning violent January 6 offenders, they're warnings to be heeded. There is an unfathomable difference between a seeming facade being constructed around this nominee here today and what he has actually done and said in real life when left to his own devices. Conduct shows character. And if you look at history, you see the danger of security chiefs in authoritarian regimes becoming the tools of political power. The characteristics that they often show are that they are vengeful, that they are grandiose, that they are intemperate, that they are partisan and blindly loyal, and that they are servile and won't say no. I'm afraid that the history of this nominee's conduct raises those warnings. And I yield my 1 second back.
Before Senator Cornyn, you said you'd like to explain something. I forget the point he made. You can do that now if you want to.
Simply this, Senator. In the collective, all of those statements are taken out of grotesque context. And anyone that thinks my 16 years of service isn't exemplary on how I would proceed if confirmed as FBI is intentionally putting false information into the public ether and creating more public discourse. The only thing that will matter if I'm confirmed as a director of the FBI is a de-weaponized, depoliticized system of law enforcement completely devoted to rigorous obedience of the Constitution and a singular standard of justice.
Before I call on Senator Cornyn, I'd like to say that we've heard about the January 6th pardons.
Mr. Patel, you supposedly know something about grand juries. I just went to the DOJ website to get language. I'm quoting it. Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 6E prohibits most persons present during the proceedings from disclosing what transpired inside the grand jury room. However, the proscription does not apply to witnesses. Do you now, as a grand jury witness, authorize this committee access to a transcript of your own testimony?
Senator, I authorize this committee to get whatever is appropriate and lawful, as I've said before.
Specifically including the transcript of your grand jury testimony, which you have the authority to authorize us to obtain.
Well, I don't know if I singularly have that authority. I don't think that's how grand jury testimony works. The
You
Department
do.
of Justice.
You do, because you are the witness who can do that.
There's also a court order on that case, sir.
Separately, you can get grand jury testimony by court order. The witnesses can always reveal their grand jury testimony. Do you authorize us to get access to your testimony?
I authorize this committee to lawfully obtain any records that they are appropriately allowed to get.
And we are only, you're speaking in circles now, because we're only lawfully authorized to get that with your permission as the witness. Do you give us that permission?
Senator, I'm not an expert on this constitutional standard, and so I can't commit to something
It's not
that
expert.
I don't know.
It's like super simple. Grand jury rule 6E doesn't apply to witnesses. This is not hard. You are a witness. That is a simple fact.
I'm just
you can
relying on my
authorize us
time
to see it.
as a prosecutor, where grand jury witnesses were not allowed to share what they were testifying to. And when I was commissioned
Grand
before
jury
the judge,
witnesses are allowed to speak about what they were told about what they said in the grand jury, unless they're under a specific court order. Are you under a specific court order not to reveal your testimony in the grand jury?
Senator, I can't
Sit
go
here
into
right now.
I can't go into court orders granted by the DC District Chief Judge.
If they apply to you, of course you can.
You want me to violate a court order?
You're saying that there's a secret court order in which you can't tell whether you're subject to a court order or not?
I'm telling you that if you find the applicable court order and it permits this request.
I don't need a court order if you give authorization.
I'm not the one that has the authority to do that.
Yes, you are, as a witness. You're just wrong on that. Second, the FBI has records related to the criminal investigations of Donald Trump. Will you protect those records in a manner consistent with ordinary FBI document preservation practices as head of the FBI?
All records will.
No destruction of documents to please Trump?
No, I think he put forth a memo saying all records must be preserved.
Good.
Senator Lujan, how about Senator Whitehouse? You're here.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll call up White House 1, which repeals the effort to undo the proposed methane fee. Can I start with the proposition that this is leaks? This is oil and gas companies not maintaining their pipelines, not maintaining their valves, not maintaining their wells, and causing methane, which is explosive and poisonous, to be leaked. All they have to do is fix their damned equipment. We also know that they've been underreporting their methane leaks for years. For years. Now it turns out we can actually measure methane with satellites, and we know they were reporting about a quarter of their leakage. So this is not an industry that comes to this with clean hands.
9 or 10.
This is basic clean up your own mess principles. All they have to do is fix their equipment to stop it. And by the way, the way this developed through the IRA, because of Senator Manchin's role in the fossil fuel industry, was that they got front-loaded, I think, $1.8 billion to clean all this up. And in return, they got this fee on leakage, which they could avoid by fixing their damn leaks with the $1.8 million to keep the money in their pockets, and now come back and try to undo this so they can keep spilling and leaking methane. Now we can catch them at it. We see it. The satellites show the methane. This is, there's a lot that I disagree with about climate stuff and the direction we're going. And I spoke in my opening statement about the dangers which are hitting our home insurance markets and which are going to translate into mortgage problems and property values problems and a whole economic cascade. But setting all that aside, this is just really dirty pool by this industry to ask all of you to allow them to maintain free leaks of poisonous explosive methane wherever they go. Find something else. There are better ways to do whatever you want to do in this reconciliation than letting it be free for these companies to leak. You know, a lot of this is in your states. It's your folks who have to breathe this. It's your folks who get in explosions when they go off. For God's sake, please, let's at least say no with respect to this one thing.
Senator Lee, and I think Senator Kennedy also would like to make a comment, but Senator Lee first.
This amendment would strike the instructions going to EPW. And by striking those instructions, we would foreclose the opportunity there to recover wasteful spending to the tune of $1 billion, wasteful spending that was brought about by a party line vote in the Inflation Reduction Act a few years ago. Now, this was too high. It's brought about awful inflation, along with so many other things in that and other pieces of legislation that were passed during that time period, making it more expensive to buy everything from gas to groceries, everything from housing to health care. One of the reasons we need to do it, as we've talked about in this bill, our border has been overrun. Public safety threats are imminent, ongoing, and have been for a long time, as the previous administration's open doors policies have enriched international drug cartels to the tune of tens of billions of dollars as they've accelerated their human and drug trafficking operations into this country. So, yeah, we've got to figure out ways to pay for that, and this is one of many ways. The measure in question includes grants for things like environmental and climate justice. And so when we think about, speaking of things that involve cleaning up your own mess, we are cleaning up a mess left to us by Democrats, a twofold mess. An open border that we have to deal with now, and a messy set of spending measures that have proven very costly to the American people. I oppose this.
Senator Kennedy, would you like to say something very quick?
I would.
Okay.
I don't know how quickly I can say it. Sheldon, I think, as I read your amendment, it's more than just about methane. And for what it's worth, I happen to agree with you about methane leaks, and I think we're doing a lot better. But what if we find a methane leak program that the Biden administration has funded that is bone deep stupid, and the money's being wasted? This, just because it's about methane doesn't mean it's either effective or efficient. And this would prevent us from making commonsensical changes. That's why I've got to oppose it. That was quick.
Absolutely, yeah.
This is very clearly targeting one particular thing, which is the methane fee, which is putting a price on leaking methane so that they don't.
But how do you know that?
They have a reason to do that.
How do you know that? How are you reading our minds?
It's pretty clear.
No, it's not.
It's pretty clear. When you look at the numbers, when you look at the instruction, and if I'm wrong, then I'll apologize to you, but let's just wait until this gets to EPW and I'll tell you this is where it's going to go. If you want right now to say, okay, we will lay off the methane fee, we will make these leakers fix their damned equipment so that 14 million homes worth of natural gas isn't just being vented into the air we breathe every single year because they're leaking and not maintaining their equipment. If you want to concede me that, if we'll take that off the table for EPW consideration, the chairman sits on EPW, he can help with that. I'm happy to pull this back. But I don't think that's the case. I think the case is that this is the target.
Respond to that?
Very quickly. No good deed goes unpunished around here. Go ahead.
And the document says so.
I'll be
stopping the methane emissions fee. Right there.
I'll be brief, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead.
Look, Senator, you're putting words in our mouth and thoughts in our head.
This is the chairman's press release.
I understand that's the chairman. That's not me. That's not the other members of this committee. I mean, Sheldon, I love you like a taco, man, but you're assuming there's some communist plot to get rid of all of the mitigation of methane. And I think you're way overstating your position.
I'm saying that the methane's methane fee is specifically targeted by the chairman in the committee's
That's
description
Lindsay.
of what
That's
this is
not
intended
me.
to do.
That's
Yeah,
Lindsay.
well,
That's
I
not
tell you
me.
what, we'll all get to vote here in a minute. Time has expired. Senator Padilla.
Senator Whitehouse.
Thanks very much. Mr. Donahue, what is the maximum number of lawyers that you have supervised in your experience as an associate in a law firm?
Thank you for your question, Senator. It varies, but it was typically anywhere from 6, usually 8, up to 10 with summer associates as well.
All lawyers?
Not all lawyers, including summer associates.
Okay. What was the maximum number of lawyers you supervised in your job at the solar company?
None, Senator. Not at the solar company.
In your work as an associate in the Buffalo law firm, did you hold yourself out as an environmental attorney?
As an environmental lawyer, I did.
You spent 1 year and 6 months practicing law for that firm in Buffalo, correct?
I was located in that firm in Buffalo, yes, Senator.
Yeah. And you were terminated by that firm after 1 year and 6 months?
That is correct, Senator. If I may just add some color to that.
Well, I have pretty short time, so we can follow up with QFRs, because I promise
Okay.
you there'll be QFRs
Understood.
on this. Have you practiced law anywhere else other than that as an associate in the firm that terminated you and in the solar company where you supervised no lawyers?
Senator, I have not.
Apart from your associate experience in Buffalo and the solar company, have you practiced law in any other place?
I have not, Senator, but I was at the agency before in the first Trump administration.
Not in a legal position?
That's correct, Senator.
Have you ever taken a deposition?
I have not, Senator. This is probably the closest I've ever come to that.
Have you ever tried a case to verdict?
No, Senator. In the firm and at the solar company, we relied on, in the solar company, we relied on outside counsel.
So you were providing inside advice at the solar council rather than active litigation work?
It was an in-house counsel role, yes. But
have you ever argued a motion?
I have not, Senator.
Court?
But as you
know what a motion in limine is?
I do vaguely, yes.
Well, you should have been better prepped because John Kennedy asks this question.
Yes.
Have you ever authored and signed a legal pleading?
I have not, Senator. But
there was a gap of several years between your graduation from law school and when you entered the bar in Washington, D.C. During that period, did you take the bar and fail to pass?
I did one time, Senator, yes, but
In
there
what
was
jurisdiction?
What, sorry?
In what jurisdiction did you take the bar and
Washington,
fail to
D.C.,
pass?
Senator, but there was a gap before I actually took the bar. I wasn't sure if I actually wanted to go and practice law, to be frank with you.
Under what circumstances would you counsel the EPA administrator to violate a court order?
Senator, thank you for that. I would never counsel the EPA administrator to violate a court order.
Under oath, can you assure us now that EPA is presently in compliance with the federal court decisions by Judge Ali Khan and Judge McConnell right now?
Senator, I believe that the agency is.
When a public official makes public accusations of criminal activity with no credible evidence to support the accusations, what legal liabilities and concerns does that raise?
Senator, as you mentioned in opening, potentially defamation, that sort of thing. But I'm not a criminal investigator. I'm not at the Department of Justice. I don't handle the various aspects of that criminal probe, so I'm not privy to that information.
There is an internal memorandum out of the agency's counsel office that relates that a significant number of grants were terminated based on a significant error, agency's words, in the terms and conditions for those grants. As the Washington Post reported today, an agency lawyer warned officials that they had cited contractual language that did not apply to many of the grants the EPA had ended in recent weeks. Grants had been terminated on grounds that they no longer fit the agency's priorities, referring to a clause in their grants general terms and conditions that applied only to grants issued between August 13, 2020 and September 30, 2024, and almost half of the terminated grants were finalized outside of that relevant period. Have the grants impacted by this significant legal error been restored to the recipients?
Senator, I've seen the reporting on that. We received your letter, in fact, 2 letters yesterday on this. I was not on that email. I think it was an email, not a memorandum, but I think we're working to track an answer down for you on that.
My time has expired.
Senator Whitehouse.
Thanks, Ambassador Greer, for being here. Just to sort of frame our conversation, tell me what a negative externality is.
This is something you and I like to talk about.
Yes, we do.
This is a situation where you have a foreign country where perhaps they have actions such as poor environmental regimes or lax labor laws, and they don't bear the cost of that. Instead, they send their goods that are the product of these processes where they have lax regulatory regimes. They send it here, and we end up bearing this. They externalize these negative externalities to us, and we have to bear it, and our workers have to bear it, and we don't compete on a level playing field.
So 2 things are wrong with this. One, the customary negative externality is pollution. And to the extent, for instance, on an issue I've done a lot of work on in bipartisan fashion, plastic in our oceans. Now it's in our drinking water, it's in breast milk. I mean, we've really gone down a very weird pathway with respect to plastics. If China, for instance, is responsible for dumping 60 or 70% of the plastics into the Pacific, then that's a harm to us, correct?
Yes, I agree.
Because it's a commons, the ocean, and we suffer from that. And then if the Chinese company is exporting their goods to the U.S., and that Chinese company has a lower cost for its product because it doesn't have proper pollution control with respect to plastic, and the U.S. company does, then that's an unfair trade imbalance, correct?
Yes, I agree with that.
So 2 things are wrong when we get into the situation of foreign countries allowing pollution that our companies pay to prevent.
That's right.
And that's an appropriate place for tariffs to be deployed to offset that trade imbalance and help protect the commons from this particular tragedy, correct?
I think trade action can be appropriate, and when the president announced his reciprocal tariff regime last Wednesday, he specifically referred to pollution by other countries in his speech. You may not have listened to it, but you may want to go back and listen to that part, because that's very true, and I agree with you. Well,
It might be the only place in which the administration shows the slightest interest in pollution, so good for that. The issue of plastics is, I think, a pretty significant one. Again, there's been a lot of bipartisan interest. I even went up to the Oval Office during Trump 1 to have one of my bills signed by the president, and he gave a very animated riff on Asian countries polluting our beautiful oceans and how it comes ashore very often in Alaska by the ton along their beaches. So I hope this is an area we can continue to work together. And in particular, I hope that you'll sit down with me and Senator Cassidy on legislation that we are working on. Will you give us that meeting?
Senator, I'll take any meeting with you that you would like to talk about this issue. And I'd like to
Well,
also let
we'll
you...
sit down with Senator Cassidy's team and have a conversation there. The other thing I wanted to flag for you is that you pretty well successfully deflected all of Senator Bennett's questions about what the immediate impact looks like in the short-term pain for the long-term gain. I just want to flag for you one issue that is very important to me. Rhode Island is a small business state, right? We don't have a whole lot of big mega corporations there who can balance things and move things around. Canada is our largest trading partner. We have companies who fill an important niche in the global supply chain, and particularly in American companies' supply chains, because they get something from Canada, or let's say China, could be, but Canada's our major trading partner, and they process that thing, and then they put it into the supply chain for the larger corporate entities. That's their business. That's all they've got. So if we're not looking out for these small businesses that are actually going to have to lock their doors and close the shutters and fire their employees and go out of business, I think you've missed a huge hole in the problem that these tariffs have created. If all you're listening to is the big mega corporations who can move things around the world and have the resources to dodge these effects, you're not getting the straight story. I think in every one of our states, there are going to be small businesses that occupy a niche in which trade is an important factor and that are going to go bust because of these tariffs. And I urge you to look out for those businesses because I don't think they're getting their voices heard at all.
So, Senator, I've talked to you about this. I've talked to Senator Hassan about this and others. One thing I asked my team to do last week was to convene a meeting of I have a trade advisory council for small business. I've asked them to convene that meeting. I've connected with the Small Business Administration. They have an international trade desk there. I've talked to I have an office that also deals with small business because I do want to hear it. I think it's important that we hear it because they don't have the same voices in Washington. I will say right now, Canada and Mexico, things coming from Canada and Mexico that comply with the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement come in duty-free. They continue to do so if they follow the rules. If they don't follow the rules and are trying to put in Chinese stuff, that's going to be tariffed. But if they follow the rules, they're going to be getting the duty-free treatment they're due.
Well, a small business that has gone broke is not very amenable to a meeting. They don't exist any longer.
Senator Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member. Good morning, Ambassador Greer. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Senator Whitehouse.
Thanks very much, Representative Long. Welcome to the committee. The taxpayer advocate in Rhode Island noticed that service dramatically improved for regular taxpayers when the additional funding for the IRS came through to the IRS, that wait times diminished, that they could get answers much more quickly. Will you work with the taxpayer advocates and listen to them to make sure that their advice is heard in your office?
Definitely. We had a little bit of a discussion on that earlier, and a lot of people still think I'm in Congress, so they still contact me with their issues. And I say, I'm not at the IRS, I can't talk about tax issues, and then I'll chat GPT, the taxpayer advocate service in their state, and there's 2 or 3 offices, 6 or 7 refer them, and I've had very good response that they said that was helpful.
What will your policy be if you're asked by political higher-ups, say at the White House, to use the IRS against perceived political
It's not going to happen. That's
how do we know
on my watch? Huh?
How will we know it's not going to happen? Are there any guardrails you'll set up to make sure that that doesn't happen?
And I guess you got to figure out if I'm telling you the truth or not, but it's not going to happen on my watch. I mean, Congressman, and there's 9 people on your 27-person committee here that I served with in the House for 12 years, most of them for 12 years.
Yeah. Will you at least make that policy clear? Will you promise to make that policy clear when you get to the IRS?
Yes,
because
there's a lot of things I want to make.
We do with the Department of Justice,
sir.
One of the things about the Department of Justice is that they're very scrupulous about not letting little squirrels running around in the White House talk to little squirrels running around in the Department of Justice and influence prosecutions without the Attorney General or the Deputy Attorney General knowing about it. Will you look at making sure in some kind of internal policy statement that you're not being circumvented with some person employed by you being told by the White House, let's go screw this person, and you don't know about it? And then they say, well, there's no policy. The IRS commissioner never said anything about that.
If I'm being circumvented, then I'm not the commissioner of the IRS. I mean, so that should not happen.
All right. Well, make sure that it doesn't, because there'll be every incentive to try to push it. We've seen the president do it with Harvard. You had questions about that already. We were told in the Finance Committee that the tax credit that you were helping these private individuals to hawk quote, "The tax credit does not exist." If you get to the IRS, what are you going to do about that?
Senator Wyden and another senator have already started an investigation, and is my way of thinking, and whatever my OGE says, since I did refer some friends to Capital Edge Strategies, who, if I can, I mean, anybody that's doing anything illegal should be investigated. It just, I mean, it's common sense.
Yeah, I guess my concern is that we now have an IRS employee who has said this tax credit that you've been hawking does not exist. And I'm wondering what they can expect by way of retaliation for having said that once you come in.
None.
All right?
I'm not, you know.
So one other thing, let me look at your donations here. The political stuff, I think we've been over this before, but if you could pull it up. So you lost your Senate primary, you carried $130,000 in debt as of August 2nd, 2022, correct? Then time goes by and none of that gets paid down. In fact, 2 years and 5 months go by, nearly 30 months. It's a pretty good long period of time, to December 4th, when suddenly it's announced that you're about to be the IRS commissioner. And after 2 years and 5 months of no activity, suddenly, starting the following day and just in the next 2 months, suddenly $165,000 floods in. Will you share with us all the communications with those donors by you or any known intermediary of yours that prompted that sudden flood of donations that ended up in your personal pocket?
As I've mentioned several times today, everything that you do with the Federal Election Commission, you have to do it by the book, by their rules, and that's exactly what I did. We followed the letter of the law with the FEC. If this stuff needs to be changed, then you need to change what the FEC does or how that.
This is different. This isn't just complying with the FEC. This is a Senate hearing about whether you should be the IRS commissioner or not. And if you started using the office of IRS commissioner to solicit funds back then, that's the kind of thing that would be shown in the communications by you or intermediaries with these individuals. Will you promise to share with the committee any communications related to that sudden surge of contributions to you?
I'll share what we shared with the FEC. I mean, everything had to be reported. Everything had to be public. It wasn't like I thought, oh, you know, these people are sending money in and now, you know.
Well,
I mean, it's in the public record. So
we all know here that what you file with the FEC versus what happens when you conduct an investigation and look back behind the filings and look at the communications and the memos and the phone call records, whatever took place. I think we're entitled in this situation, Chairman, by the way, happy birthday.
Thank you.
to you know, have a look at that as if there were an investigation going on and to see the actual documents behind all of this. And so that will be my ask, and my time, as I said, is expired.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Whitehouse.
Thanks very much. Administrator Sheldon, on April 23rd, Daniel Coogan, for the EPA, filed a sworn statement in court that said, and I quote here, EPA leadership conducted an individualized grant-by-grant review to determine which grants should continue. He made that statement under oath, and on the following page of his declaration, he said that there were approximately 377 grantees that had received cancellation notices and another 404 grantees who would receive notices within the next 2 weeks, for a total, by my math, of 781 total grantees. Do you dispute his testimony that there were 781 individual grants at issue?
The exact number I don't have offhand, but
you don't dispute it. So let's say that it's 781 or thereabouts.
I did those myself.
His testimony under oath was that took place. Then, and I'd ask unanimous consent that that declaration of Daniel Coogan be made an exhibit. Then, on May 6th, Travis Voiles of EPA made the following statement, also under oath, also in a court filing. He said, on February 25th, 2025, I conducted an individualized review of EPA grant programs. That day, I decided that certain grant programs should be terminated for policy reasons. So there are three things about that Voiles statement that are noteworthy. First, the date. He said that he did this all on February 25th, which is interesting, because if he put in a 10-hour day, that's 600 minutes of time for 781 grant applications, which means he would have had to conclude his review of each of them in 45 seconds without even a bathroom break. The second thing about the statement is that he said, I conducted, not you conducted, Administrator Zeldin, not leadership conducted. He said he conducted, and he said that under oath. The third thing that was interesting is that he dropped in a weasel word, programs. He didn't say individualized review of grants. He said individualized review of grant programs. Mr. Zeldin, is there a difference between a grant and a grant program?
Well, you have individual grants inside of a grant program.
And you could have dozens or even hundreds of individual grants inside of a grant program,
I know
correct?
for a fact that Travis
Correct.
Voiles individually reviewed every single grant individually, and I know that I've reviewed every single grant individually, and I also know that,
That is
Travis
not what the
Voiles was
sworn
working-
testimony indicates. Let me reclaim my time here.
But the fact
On
is,
May
we
16th,
both individually reviewed all of the grants, and I know that he was working on it every single day, not just on one day.
well, that's not what his sworn testimony was. And on May 16th, DOJ career lawyers who are under an obligation of candor to the tribunal, upon which their right to practice law depends, filed a pleading in federal court that conceded that you had not done individualized grant-by-grant reviews. They were not contesting that APA failed to do an individualized review. In court, they admitted, in fact, their language is, defendants do not contest judgment on the merits of plaintiffs' APA claims. I'd ask that the reply be put into the record, that the Voiles declaration be put into the record, and that an Inside EPA news report that discusses that court proceeding be put into the record.
Without objection.
And then yesterday, you stated during your House E&C hearing that you personally reviewed all these grants. Here's what you said. I was the one who made the decision. And I made the decision after doing individual review. I personally reviewed every single grant that I canceled. Now, you guys are going to have to start getting your stories straight, because there are three completely different statements, and they cannot all be true. It cannot be that Voiles personally, himself, conducted the review of 781.
He did.
And that Coogan
I did.
saw to it that it was individually done.
Others did. It's a crazy concept, Senator, but maybe more than one person was individually reviewing these grants. Maybe they were working on it for more than one day, Senator. Have
Will you
thought
show
about that concept?
Will you?
What about the fact
When
that
their
when
testimony
each of these,
is that they did it all on one day,
I
no, I do
announced
not.
every single time.
I do not
that I
agree
was
with that,
canceling the grant,
Administrator.
Senator.
He swore in court that he did it on one day. So you
make a
can't now come in and say that that's
decision
false.
on a day after you work on it,
He
busting
didn't
your
say.
ass for a while to get all of your ducks lined up,
That's
to
not
do
what
all
he
the
said.
research, to ask questions, to make sure you're making responsible decisions.
None of that is what he
Because they're
said.
not worried that there's going to be some ranking member at the
None of that is
CEPW
what he
committee
said.
who doesn't care about the facts.
None of that is what he said. I'm using the facts as your employees
I conducted
stated
an
them.
individual review of everything, and that
When?
concept doesn't
When?
work for you.
When? When did you conduct an individualized
Work on it
review
every
of
single day,
781
because
grants?
we have a zero tolerance
Will you
policy
show me
towards
your
wasting
schedule?
dollars. We inherit something. You don't care about wasting money.
Will you show me
You
your
don't care
schedule?
about wasting money, but the Trump administration does, Senator.
Will you show me your schedule?
Our schedule's publicly released. We don't put on the schedule every single moment
Will you
of
show
the
me
day
your
that
schedule
It's
to
publicly
prove
released.
your assertion
I'm
that
here
you
under
did
oath,
individualized
Senator.
review of
Under
781?
oath telling you that I was reviewing this stuff and working on it almost every single day.
And the
Why?
problem
because
with
when I
that-
was before this committee, I was asked by Senator Ricketts, if confirmed, would I immediately make this a top priority to go through all the grant funding going through EPA to make sure that we are cracking down on every waste, every aspect of abuse. Because I have to come back here in front of Senator Ricketts today. And even though you don't care about wasting tax dollars, Senator Ricketts does.
And the
I'm going to
problem-
do my job because the American public
And the
cares
problem-
about us not wasting tax dollars.
And the problem with your assertion here today is that it is belied by your own employees' sworn statements in court and by the decision of the
Senator,
Department of
you're not
Justice
grasping
to
the fact-
admit that what you
No,
say
you're
isn't
not
true.
grasping the fact that we would have multiple employees looking at these grants. That concept just escapes you like that's even a possibility.
The only
You
thing
come
about
here
that is that
and
that's not
you don't care
true.
about 99% of the story.
That's not true according to your own employees'
You're not grasping
testimony.
it, Senator. I don't know what to say to you. You're insisting on the fact.
I'm
that
insisting
there's-
on the facts.
that
That's
he
exactly
only-
what I'm insisting
Yes,
on. I'm
okay.
insisting on the facts, and I now have
I will
three
say
different
again
versions of the facts,
that Travis
including
Hoyles
Department
and
of
I
Justice
and others
lawyers
are working on this every
who
single
admitted
day that
in
we're
court
in
that what you're
office.
saying
And we're
now
not going
is
to
not
waste
true.
dollars just because you insist on EPA lighting taxpayer dollars on fire. The American taxpayers, they put President Trump in office because of people like you. They have Republicans in charge of the House and Senate because of people like you. Because you don't care about 99% of this story. You don't want me to go through the list of all the evidence of waste and abuse. You
No,
don't
what I
care
want you to do,
in conflicts of interest.
What I want
don't care
you to
about
do-
unqualified recipients. You don't care about
what I
reduced
want you to
agency
do
oversight.
is explain why the Department of Justice lawyers representing EPA in court under a duty of candor have said that everything you've just said isn't true. That's what I want. Get me that answer.
I'm here before this committee
I've
under
exceeded my
oath.
time. I'll let the chairman take back the gavel.
Thank you. All right, well, we seem to have a little bit of a disagreement. Perhaps we can work on this in the future about the difference between the discrepancy here. Does that sound fair?
Absolutely. I think getting to the basis and the bottom of this dispute is very important, and the facts actually matter here.
All right.
Mr. Zeldin.
Hello again.
Hello again. I hope you'll answer my questions. I'd appreciate it. The first is, on February 17th, the FBI told Citibank to freeze the GGRF funds. Did you have anything to do with that?
No.
Were you aware of that?
I was made aware of that.
Shortly after?
I think I got my update on that after Citibank instituted the freeze.
Okay. Do you know who the FBI was reporting to when it took that action?
All of the stuff that you went through a lot earlier that I mean, we're not, as you know, at the Judiciary Committee hearing. There are questions that I just don't have the answers
Yeah, that's
for
fine.
as far as a different
Just say
agency.
you don't know, that's fine. Were you aware that on February 18th, the criminal chief of the DC U.S. Attorney's Office resigned over this effort to get this freeze?
I learned about that reading about it in the newspaper.
Okay, so shortly after February 18th, when that became news.
Whenever it broke in the news.
Did you find out at some point that Mr. Martin had failed to get his order from the magistrate judge?
What would ask the question again? Did I learn what?
U.S. Attorney Martin
Right, I understand.
went to the magistrate judge seeking an order that would allow for the freeze of the Citibank held assets.
I was aware of that.
Okay.
After the fact.
Do you know when the order was denied?
I don't have that date.
Okay. The reason I'm asking this is because on February 23rd, 2025, you said about the GGRF that the entire scheme, in my opinion, is criminal, which is a pretty strong word to use. And I'm trying to figure out what you knew when you said it was criminal. So you knew by then, at least, that the criminal chief had resigned over this issue. It's not clear whether you knew at that time that Martin's order had been rejected by the magistrate judge. Could you find that out for me? What was the timing of when you knew that Martin's order had been rejected by the judge in comparison to your statement that this was criminal.
Yeah, and would you like me to tell you everything that I knew when I made that statement?
Sure.
Okay. So the first thing was a
Particularly-
Biden
particularly-
EPA official.
Well, not right now. We can do this in a QRF, because I'd like to get through some other questions. Later on March 6th, you also said that this was either a kickback, a theft, or graft, or all of the above on Fox News. And if you could also put into the timeline of what you knew and when you knew it, that March 6th statement. I would be grateful to that, about that. Now, somewhere between March 9th and 10th, there was a series of emails between EPA and DOJ in which the top career EPA attorney, a gentleman named Jim Payne, warned that there were significant legal vulnerabilities with the Citibank freeze. Do you know what those significant legal vulnerabilities were that he was referring to?
I could speculate that if you're going through what is claimed to be a breach of contract, and the Court of Federal Claims, which is the court that would actually have jurisdiction over it, not a district court, inside there they would determine, one, if there was a breach of contract, and then two, they would decide on damages.
So it could be not on the merits, but just on the venue, on the appropriate court.
Well, I'm just saying, the way that process would go, so those $20 billion went to 8 pass-through entities. A little over $3 billion of that actually was dispersed. The rest has been frozen. All the grants have been terminated.
Let me ask you about that, because my time is getting a little bit short here. I'm sorry to cut you off, but the New York Times has reported that one of the grantees has been told it no longer needs to comply with a February 20 subpoena, suggesting that the investigation is closing. Is the investigation closing?
Again, you should ask that question. Any question that you have as far as Justice Department as an agency should be directed to the Justice Department. It would
You
be
were
great
not
for us
you
to
were not
spend this-
involved in all of that.
No, I'm focused on the EPA.
Okay.
And I
So
think this would be
focusing
great
on the
for us
EPA
to-
in my last seconds,
Please,
DOJ lawyers representing EPA admitted in the Circuit Court of Appeals that they are not accusing anybody of fraud. That's their quote, not accusing anybody of fraud. And EPA in that courtroom specifically reiterated several times that no grantee had engaged in any fraud, waste, or abuse. Do you stand by the statements of your lawyers in that courtroom?
I would love to be able to go through the list of all of the waste and abuse that I'm aware of, but it seems like you and your colleagues want anything other than for me to go through the list of evidence.
You're more than welcome to submit a list of all the evidence, but when I only
But I
have
don't know
5
why you guys
minutes,
just-
I don't want you to.
You don't want me to go through the list of evidence.
You
You just
eat up-
want to say that
you
we
eat
don't
up-
have any,
you eat up-
right?
No,
You
no,
just want to
so
say we
stop.
don't have any,
No,
and
let me
then
stop
say
you.
I don't
Hold
have
on,
time to
hold
actually
on,
go through the list.
hold on. Let me stop you right there. It's not me saying that you don't have any. It's your lawyers in a court
Okay, so
proceeding
allow
saying
me
you
to
don't
talk-
have
Allow
any.
me to talk through it.
So I'll take it as a question for the record because our time is up. But please, give me your list. I'd be more than happy to
I
review
already
it.
sent you over a lot of it, but I guess you haven't read it.
All right, here we go.
Senator Whitehouse. Thanks very much, Chairman. Let me follow up on Senator Tillis's questions, Mr. Geiser. On this committee, I lived through the OLC torture opinions, which were so bad that the administration that wrote them had to withdraw them. The warrantless wiretapping opinions, which were so bad that they created a mutiny within the Department of Justice, and with the walk back of OLC from enforcing the so-called Reagan memo, which posits that the department and OLC in particular will be a somewhat neutral arbiter in conflicts between the executive and the legislative branch over oversight. In all of those matters, the OLC became the active, as Senator Tillis said, the active partisan for the administration and not a neutral decider. If I look at your record, first, how long have you been a lawyer?
Thank you very much, Senator Whitehouse. I've been a lawyer for 10 years.
And how many of those were you a law clerk?
I was a law clerk for 3 different jurists. About a total of 28 months.
And how many of those years were spent in private practice?
I was in private practice, Senator, for about 4 years.
At the associate level?
I was an associate, yes, sir.
How long have you served as Ohio Solicitor General?
I've served since November of 2023 and currently serve as Ohio Solicitor General.
Have you ever tried a case to a final judgment?
Well, thank you very much for that question, Senator. I have worked on trial litigation teams. I have not myself been personally the counsel of record in a trial case. I am primarily an appellate lawyer and an advisor and counselor.
Have you ever personally appeared in trial court?
Yes, Senator.
Now, some time ago, you had pretty strong views about President Trump. You said that, quote, his political positions are a lot like his hair, pasted on for effect and flopping whichever way the wind blows. That he has an astonishing weakness for flattery, falling for Vladimir Putin after a few coquettish bats of the eyelashes from the Russian thug, and that he is a short-fingered vulgarian candidate. Since then, have you had a role in Donald Trump's litigation that tried to overturn the results of the 2020 election?
Well, thank you for that question, Senator. Like millions of Americans, I have seen the courage and the results that President Trump has delivered. I watched in that field in Pennsylvania as he stood after the assassin's bullet, and I hope my children look up to and live up to that kind of courage in their life.
So while in private practice, did you have a role in Donald Trump's litigation that tried to overturn the results of the 2020 election?
Well, thank you for that question, Senator. I was retained by Donald J. Trump for President Incorporated in the 2020 campaign to provide legal advice, which I did.
The former White House press secretary testified that you were one of her go-to people to advance the argument that Vice President Pence could overturn the 2020 election. Is that true?
Well, Senator, as you know, ethical obligations of confidentiality attach to any client matter. And as a former attorney for a former client, I am not going to divulge the confidential communications that I made to that client.
Just if I look at this, you don't seem to have the legal experience that most OLC chiefs have. You seem to have done a very abrupt pivot politically into the Trump camp and into election denialism. On what basis should I have any confidence that you will exert any independence or judgment within OLC if the Trump administration comes knocking on your door for an opinion and won't go down the road of we'll give you your free torture opinion, we'll give you your free warrantless wiretap opinion, and we won't bother to enforce the Reagan memo any longer? What will keep you from going down those bad roads that we've seen OLC go down?
Well, thank you, Senator Whitehouse. The first role of any lawyer is to be able to state the law as it is. And the Office of Legal Counsel serves an important role in our administration by providing a neutral opinion objectively of what the law is.
Will you do that?
Yes, Senator.
Okay, Mr. Woodward, last question. I'll re-ask Ranking Member Durbin's question a slightly different way. Under what circumstances would you recommend that the Trump administration defy a lower court order?
Mr. Chairman, I see my time has expired. May I answer the question?
Please, you should answer, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Whitehouse, I can't imagine a circumstance in which I would be called upon to advise the defiance of a court order. I've had the great privilege of working with President Trump now for many years, and I just don't ever imagine a circumstance in which I would be called upon to give advice of that nature.
Even for lower courts? Time begins. May I take a moment to make a point of order?
Yes.
You indicated, Mr. Chairman, in your opening remarks that the committee should be constrained by the deliberative process privilege.
Yes.
And by the attorney-client privilege in our examination of this witness. It's my understanding that Congress has never accepted the constitutional validity of either such privilege as an inhibition of our constitutional congressional oversight responsibilities. And so I don't intend to follow that direction because I don't think it's correct. And I think it abdicates really important oversight authorities that we have. Moreover, particularly when we are in a nominations process and somebody has affirmatively put themselves forward, to then have them seek the shelter of deliberative process and attorney-client privilege puts us in an even worse position. So I think if we were ever going to do this, nominations are the low ebb of any justification for that. It gets even worse when the nominee faces questions about official misconduct as a lawyer. Among other reasons, privileges tend to fall when misconduct is alleged. And so for all of those reasons, I, just as one senator, reject the proposition that this committee must yield in its questioning and in its fact-finding in an oversight or nominations matter to those executive privileges. I don't think Congress has ever taken the position that they supervene our constitutional oversight authority, and I think it was a unfortunate occasion that happened this morning.
If Senator Whitehouse is asking this farmer to listen to more lawyers, I'll be glad to consult.
I'd be delighted to follow up on this because I think it's a really bad position for this committee to put itself in with respect to nominees or other oversight matters, particularly when we oversee the Department of Justice that is stuffed with lawyers who can easily cook up an attorney-client privilege defense or a deliberative process defense, and then we are now in a no-fly zone with respect to our oversight responsibilities. Nobody takes oversight responsibilities more seriously than you, Chairman, so I hope we can come to a better accommodation on this than your opening statement suggests.
Right now, I can't say more than I have.
That's fine. That's fine. And I'd also like to ask unanimous consent to put into the record, to the extent that has not been done so far, the whistleblower report that has been discussed, the resignation letters of the career officers in the Adams prosecution, the resignation statement by Denise Chung in the GGRF matter, the article that I have here from Politico related to the nominee's management character, and the Wall Street Journal editorial describing him as a smash-mouth partisan who wields the law as a weapon.
Without objection.
Okay, with that, thank you. I guess my clock got started already. Mr. Bovee, what was your role in Ed Martin's plan to create a unpredicated criminal investigation as a basis for trying to seize greenhouse gas reduction funds? Were you engaged with him in that plan?
I'm not aware of such a plan, Senator, but I did participate in the matter that you're referring to.
Plan matter, okay. Did you know that before he took office, he had expressed private opinions about the, I'll call it GGRF for time purposes, before he came in?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Okay. Did he consult with you regarding his efforts to get a document together to present to a magistrate judge to provide a basis for freezing and seizing the GGRF funds?
Senator, like many nominees before me who come to testify before this committee and are at the same time simultaneously serving in the department, this includes Justice Kagan, Justice Kavanaugh, Judge Katsas, all at various times, but were serving or served previously. I'm not going to be able to comment on the specifics of matters like that.
I'm not asking you at this point. I'm asking you, were you consulted regarding that?
And my answer is limited to I participated in the matter. And if there's public information about the matter that you'd like me to try and address, I'm happy to do my best to do that.
The chief of the criminal division was removed after she refused to sign off on the proposal, on the proposed pleading. Were you involved in her removal?
I've read public reports about that, and to my recollection of those reports, I believe she resigned.
Did you approve the U.S. attorney demanding her resignation and pressing her out of her office?
I'm not able to go beyond the fact that I participated in the matter that you're referring to, Senator.
Were you aware that U.S. Attorney Martin went into court alone without any other career attorney or any other attorney in the office willing to sign off on the pleading in which he sought the freeze or seizure?
I'm not sure if that's true or not, Senator.
We can look at the pleading. Nobody else signed. He ran out the criminal chief for refusing to sign. Presumably, he went shopping for somebody else who would sign. Nobody did, so he went in alone. Will you agree that it's very unusual for a politically appointed United States attorney to file a pleading without the support of a single career prosecutor in the office?
No, I don't agree with that.
Okay, well. Were you aware that when he did go in alone without the support of a career prosecutor in the office, he was shot down by the magistrate judge in pursuing the order?
Senator, I refer you to my previous answer. I'm not able to go beyond the fact that I participated in the matter.
Did you, would you agree that ordinarily the Department of Justice does its very best to make sure that its pleadings are sufficiently well prepared that they're not shot down by magistrate judges?
Yes, of course.
After it was shot down by the judge, did you participate in shopping the matter to other offices so that the effort to seize or freeze the GDRF funds could be pursued despite the U.S. Attorney's failure?
Senator, I'd refer you to my previous answer. I'm able to confirm I participated in this matter. Based on public reporting, I am aware that there are certainly other districts with grantees who receive funds from these programs where under the law that applies to venue, it would be appropriate for similar investigations to take place.
Did you contact them?
I refer you to my prior answer, Senator.
Did you let them know that the effort by Interim U.S. Attorney Martin had been shot down?
I apologize, Senator. I'm not trying to be difficult, but I must refer you to my prior answer.
Senator Kennedy?
Just, if I may,
Yes.
Chairman.
Proceed.
This is not further questioning. I know my time is expired. Do you see my point now? We have an individual here who is here seeking confirmation to one of the highest judicial offices in the land. I'm asking quite legitimate questions about potential misconduct in office. Some of it has nothing to do with the substance of pleadings, but has to do with administrative matters like seeking the removal of a criminal career chief prosecutor. Some of it has to do with administrative matters like case assignment. And the fact that I can't get anything resembling a straight answer in the circumstances that we're in right now, I think is signals a really bad moment for this committee, and I hope we can reconsider.
I would be glad to discuss that with you.
Can we get him back then once the rules are clear?
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bove, I'm looking at your resume. It's Bove, right?
Bovee, Senator.
Senator Whitehouse, do you want to go ahead and go?
Sure. Thanks, Chairman. If you don't mind, could I start my questioning in just a moment and make a point of order or an observation? I didn't want to interrupt the questioning of Mr. Bovee. The chairman had signaled that he didn't want any further interruptions. But I did want to point out with respect to my concern that Mr. Bovee was failing.
You don't have a point of order regarding this panel.
No, the previous
If you
one.
would just hold that until we're through this, and you're more than welcome to do it at the end of the
Do you mind if I
hearing.
do it now? I'm here. It'll just take a
Go
minute.
ahead and start your questioning so we can keep the record clean. So go ahead and ask your questions.
Mr. Pratt, is it true that you are a fellow at Claremont Institute Center for Constitutional Jurisprudence, founded and run by John Eastman?
I was a John Marshall Fellow. I believe that year is correct. I believe that's correct, Senator.
Are you aware of Mr. Eastman's role in supplying Donald Trump with the false argument that Vice President Pence could overturn the 2020 election?
I don't have personal knowledge of the situation you're describing. I'm aware generally of news reports and headlines, but I would say that my knowledge is very limited, Senator.
Your knowledge on that is limited to what you've read in the public media?
That's correct.
You haven't had conversations with Eastman about it?
No, I don't. I've not had a conversation.
Is it true that you are a senior counsel at First Liberty Institute, an institute overseen by Kelly Shackelford?
Yes, that's right, Senator.
Are you aware that in December of 2020, Kelly Shackelford signed a letter urging United States senators to try to overturn the 2020 election?
So I don't recall the content precisely of that letter, Senator, and I'm not prepared to speak about the characterization of that letter. I do know that he signed a letter in about that time frame concerning the general subject matter of the election.
Have you discussed that letter with Mr. Shackelford?
No, I have not.
Do you know Ken Klakowski, who was also senior counsel at First Liberty?
I believe I have met him twice.
Are you aware of his role in helping Jeffrey Clark draft the letter that Clark wanted the Department of Justice to send to states, specifically Georgia, in an effort to overturn the 2020 election?
I'm not, Senator.
And have you had any conversation in those two meetings with Mr. Klakowski with him regarding that letter or that effort?
I don't recall ever having a conversation with him about that, no.
Do you know Jeffrey Clark, who wrote that letter?
He worked at the Department of Justice during the same time frame that I was there. I believe that I had been in maybe a couple of meetings where maybe his staff was present and I saw him in the hallway, but I don't know him well, Senator, no.
And you did not discuss with him that letter?
No, Senator.
Okay. You are a fellow at the Leo 9 Forum, which I guess is not Leonard Leo in the number 9. It's as in like a lion. Do you know Leonard Leo? He's involved in that group.
I have met Mr. Leo on a couple of occasions. It's been a while since I've seen him, Senator.
Do you agree with President Trump's comments that he is a sleazebag who hates America?
So, Senator, I understand that you're asking me to comment on posts that the president has made on social media. As a sitting judge and as a nominee to a federal vacancy, it would be inappropriate for me to comment on the content of the president's social media feed. The canons preclude me from stating a position on matters of public and political controversy.
Okay, let's turn to experience. How many cases have you personally tried to verdict or final judgment in court before a judge or jury?
My judiciary questionnaire should list the cases. I believe as lead counsel, that would be 2, Senator.
Have you ever drafted a complaint?
I have, Senator, yes.
Have you ever drafted an answer?
Yes, I believe so. Maybe not in total, but certainly in part.
Have you ever conducted pretrial discovery?
Depends on what you mean by conduct. I have been on teams that have been involved in discovery matters and have supervised trial teams, and I have argued in opposition to a motion to compel.
Have you ever conducted a voir dire?
I have not, Senator, no.
Have you ever conducted a direct examination of a courtroom witness?
So, Senator, during my time as an attorney, I have focused on appellate matters, issues and appeals.
So the answer would be no to that?
I believe the answer is no, Senator.
Have you ever conducted a cross-examination of a courtroom witness?
Again, Senator, it's the same answer. My practice did not
And have you
focus
ever
on
argued
matters.
a motion in limine?
No, Senator, I don't believe that I have. Again, my practice is centered on issues and appeals. I have practiced at every level of the state and federal court system. I've handled matters in federal and state trial courts, federal and state appellate courts, and the U.S. and Florida Supreme Courts.
My time has expired.
Thank you, Senator Whitehouse. Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Artow,
Is in the record. We will grant that request. Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. Let me, as to Emil Bove, let me start with this nominee. Having told a room full of Department of Justice lawyers that if the federal courts didn't back off on restricting unlawful deportations, they would have to tell courts, F you. I hope we can agree that telling courts F you is not an attribute we want in someone seeking to be a judge. We know that he said it because it is so abundantly corroborated in real-time communications among the lawyers present. They talk in texts about the FU comment contemporaneously in that very matter. Prosecutors don't get better corroboration than that. We'd also be on solid ground concluding that he lied about it to us in committee. He said he didn't recall. Really? Didn't recall saying something like that in a Department of Justice meeting surrounded by career lawyers? It's not remotely credible. Lying to our committee also is not a great attribute of a candidate to be a judge. Somehow, he seemed to know that he would get away with it. He also played a bit of verbal dodgem, saying he never instructed anyone to disobey a court order. Correct, but that was not the allegation. He told them to be ready to disobey court orders, to tell courts, F you. Obviously, if you change the statement, you can mislead the committee, but we should demand better than that. Meanwhile, over in the United States District Court of Appeals, there is an order suspending Judge Boasberg's investigation into this matter. He announced a contempt investigation to look into what the hell went on at the Department of Justice with respect to these illegal deportations. Emil Bove is in the thick of that. He absolutely will be part of that contempt investigation. And 2 Trump judges on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals suspended that investigation. There's a lot of commentary now about how on earth that temporary hours and days suspension has now lasted, what, a month? Perhaps just in time for this committee to ram through this nominee likely to be a subject of that criminal contempt hearing while it's delayed. If we are being played that way, with Trump judges delaying a contempt hearing that necessarily involves our nominee so that he can be shoved through, something is really rotten in Denmark. This whole mess around those deportations and his lying to this committee is all consistent with Bovi's lawless character. He helped cook up an improper deal in a criminal case against the mayor of New York, which his own DOJ colleague called a quid pro quo, and an improper offer of immigration enforcement assistance in exchange for a dismissal of his case. That is disgraceful prosecutorial behavior. That colleague, the acting U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, then resigned rather than go along with that rotten scheme. And another Trump administration crony also admitted it. Border czar Tom Homan appeared on Fox News with that mayor and said, speaking of the mayor, if he doesn't come through, if he doesn't deliver the immigration support we need, I'll be back in New York City and we won't be sitting on the couch. I'll be in his office up his butt saying, where the hell is the agreement we came to? The agreement. Separately, this nominee tried with acting U.S. Attorney Martin to confect a fake criminal investigation. Tried to confect a fake criminal investigation. Listen to those words. To allow an improper seizure of funds Congress had appropriated and that were obligated and disbursed to the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. Career prosecutors pointed out you can't have a criminal investigation with no crime, with no predication, with no basis. And the career criminal chief who'd worked through multiple administrations was forced out of her job for her pains, pointing out that this was a fake criminal investigation, and they went forward with it anyway, Bovee and Martin. These are not minor prosecutorial glitches. These are true violations of the basic oath of a prosecutor. Another principle prosecutors follow is not to publicly disparage subjects of your investigation, both because it's low, it should be beneath a prosecutor, and because longstanding DOJ policy prohibits it. Bovee's official client, the EPA administrator, made repeated public statements accusing the fund and its participants and its administrators. By the way, among its participants was that notorious criminal organization, Habitat for Humanity. Accused them of being corrupt, of being criminal, of engaging in kickbacks, of theft, and of graft. None of that is even remotely appropriate. All of it is in violation of DOJ policy, and we couldn't even get answers about that violation. I ask consent that my June 18, 2025 letter to the Department of Justice on these topics be entered into the record.
Without objection.
These are truly evil abuses of DOJ's powers that this person led. Those are some of the problems with this nominee. Then come the problems with our committee process, in which he was pre-licensed to refuse to answer questions. The committee conceded something Congress has never before conceded, that deliberative process and attorney-client privileges overcome our constitutional powers of oversight and advice and consent. Senator Kennedy and I noted this in our bipartisan report on executive privilege in December of 22. I quote, Congress maintains that all other components of executive privilege, besides presidential communications, that the executive branch recognizes, including deliberative process and attorney-client privilege, still quoting here, are not constitutionally grounded and therefore cannot supervene Congress's oversight authority. The majority, having made that astounding reversal and concession, then didn't even follow the rules for assertion of those supposed privileges, neither as to their scope nor as to the process for claiming them. These privileges need to be asserted. It's notable that this nominee never actually asserted them. He likely realized that they don't, in fact, actually pertain, and he didn't want to get caught out in the legal error of asserting a non-pertinent privilege. Plus, he didn't have to, since his non-answers were blessed in advance by the majority. Instead, he hid behind vague claims, not privilege assertions, vague claims of inappropriateness, or things not being public, or failures to recall. Just to remind, attorney-client privilege and deliberative process privilege, even if they pertained here, do not apply to administrative decisions within a department, and deliberative process, indeed any executive privilege, does not apply where the allegation is misconduct. Again, from my report with Senator Kennedy, quoting the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, the privilege disappears altogether when there is any reason to believe government misconduct occurred. We have enormous reason to believe that this individual, now a nominee, participated in government misconduct. The only executive privilege that Congress does recognize requires some proximity to the president. It is not applicable in ordinary agency administration, and the president must invoke it according to the Reagan memo. None of that took place under the blanket authorization to refuse to answer. We are dealing here with a nominee's attempts from a very high position in the Department of Justice to cook up a fake criminal investigation and to use an existing criminal case for political leverage over an elected official with too many accompanying violations of DOJ rules and practices to count. And we can't even get answers? The result was a hearing that more resembled a rackets hearing from The Godfather than a nomination hearing for a Circuit Court of Appeals judgeship. Throw in the Attorney General and Deputy showing up in person to give Republicans in this committee the eyeball, and the resemblance gets worse. Hearing by hearing, month by month, the bar is lowered and lowered and lowered for our constitutional advice and consent oversight. Now to the point where a witness can say, I don't recall, and it would be inappropriate, and that's not public to any question, no matter how bad the behavior, no matter how good the corroboration, and get away with it. Even with multiple credible, backstopped allegations of prosecutive misconduct by this individual before us, we are become a partisan rubber stamp. Neither the committee nor the judiciary is well served by our learned and servile helplessness. I yield back.
I will now go to voting because we have...
One committee is returning back from recess on this. Senator Whitehouse is recognized for questions.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I want to talk to you about Rhode Island. When you were last sitting there, here's what I said to you. I want to read it back to you because I want it to sink in. CMS has for years maintained a reimbursement system that the bureaucracy could never explain, never justify, that persistently pays Rhode Island providers less than neighboring Massachusetts and Connecticut providers, a difference of 23 and 26% in our regional healthcare market. Rhode Island's healthcare system is bleeding out because we aren't paid what neighboring hospitals and doctors are paid. And the one act that CMS took on this issue years ago was to make it worse. I raised that with you then. I've raised it since with Dr. Oz. I've raised it with CMMI Director Sutton. I would like to get action from CMS on that. One partial avenue of relief for Rhode Island is the AHEAD program, Rhode Island is a willing voluntary participant in the AHEAD program. Coming behind Rhode Island is Connecticut. What remains to be seen is whether the payment rates agreed to for Rhode Island will suffer the same discriminatory discount with respect to the AHEAD rates for Connecticut as Connecticut comes through. I've been able to get no assurances from CMS that they care one whit about this payment differential or that they see AHEAD as a means of resolving this injustice. Mr. Kennedy, our healthcare system is teetering as a result of this. This is not a casual matter, and I would really like to see you and Dr. Oz and Mr. Dutton put your attention onto this Rhode Island problem. There is no conceivable justification for paying a hospital in Fall River 23% more than Rhode Island Hospital when Rhode Island Hospital provides more and better services, as recognized by the Secret Service, which will take an injured president from Martha's Vineyard to the Rhode Island Hospital Trauma Center, flying right over St. Anne's Hospital in Fall River, yet Fall River gets paid more. It makes no sense, and it has to be resolved. The other problem that I mentioned to you is that I'm now in my 4th round of CMMI directors. It's bloody Groundhog Day, trying to get something done about how end-of-life patients are treated. I'm offering Rhode Island as a willing example of how we can do it better. It is idiotic and cruel to force a family to put their dying loved one through 3 days and 2 nights of a hospital before they can put them in a nursing home. It is equally ridiculous to not allow palliative and curative care to happen together. Providing home care when someone is dying, even if they can still get out of the house or into the yard, is a basic thing to ask. And to have respite care be that somebody comes to the house instead of taking a dying family member to a hospital, that's not even respite. Every single one, Mr. Kennedy, of these waivers has been granted in the past by CMMS and other circumstances. All I want is for somebody to come and work out how we do this in Rhode Island. What is our patient base that we'll do this in, how we put the waivers together. To quote your CMS director, Mr. Oz, he said, as we discussed in your office, we must re-examine how end-of-life care is addressed in this country. I'm offering Rhode Island as an example of how to make it better. I hope you will concede that right now it is not good. So
Senator,
I need you to respond to me. You guys know where to find me. I'm up in the Hart Building.
Yeah.
We've reached out, we've tried for meetings, and the progress in all 3 of those areas, fixing the payment gap, getting ahead balanced regionally, and following through on our desire to do good things, improving end-of-life care with waivers you guys have already granted, has gotten me so far no place. And forgive my impatience, a lot of it predates you. I put a hold on Biden nominees because I was getting jerked around by your bureaucracy. I'd like it to end and get some progress.
Yeah, you know, Senator, you raised this during my confirmation hearing, and I said to you then, and you were very civil. You raised something that makes a lot of sense to the extent that we have the power to fix it at CMS. I'd like to do it. We've had the same kind of complaints from Vermont. But I said to you at that time, call me and let's come talk about this. You have my cell phone. You can call me anytime. I've never heard from you in 7 months. Call me up. I'd love to meet with you. I'll get Oz in the meeting, and what you're saying, particularly about at the end of life, it may be something we can do something about. I want to help, and let me know.
We'll try. Forgive my frustration. You've got 30,000 employees. They could have reached out to me. They know where I live.
Yes.
Boy, is my timing good.
It is very good.
Director Patel, welcome.
Thank you, sir.
When you were here for your confirmation, we talked about your so-called enemies list. It appears to me that there have been adverse actions of various kinds taken against about 20 of the 60 people on your enemies list. You've been in office for 7 months. At that rate, you've got 14 months until you've hit all 60. Can you explain that?
Again, that is an entirely inaccurate presupposition. I do not have an enemies list. You can continue to characterize it as you wish. The only actions we take, generally speaking, for personnel at the FBI are ones based on merit and qualification and your ability to uphold your constitutional duty. You fall short, you don't work there anymore.
Well, there was a list. You don't like it to be called an enemies list, and it had about 60 names, and about 20 have had an adverse action. So those are, I think, pretty clear facts. Let me move on to your grand jury testimony, which we also talked about when you were here. I think you indicated that you understood that a witness in the grand jury is free to discuss afterwards whatever they told the grand jury. And you then went on to suggest, saying, I can't go into court orders granted by the DC District Chief Judge, and you want me to violate a court order. In those remarks, you fairly plainly suggested that there was a court order of some kind that somehow restricted or limited your ability to discuss your own testimony to that grand jury. Since then, that chief judge that you mentioned, Judge Boasberg, has written, and I'm quoting him here, Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 6E allows witnesses like Patel to divulge the contents of their testimony, meaning that nothing was preventing him from doing so before the committee. Can we confirm here today that there is no court order of any kind that limits your ability as a witness before the grand jury to discuss your own testimony to that grand jury?
We can confirm that pursuant to my action, that grand jury testimony has been released, the transcript.
Let's, in what forum was it released, may I ask?
Publicly.
Okay, we'll check on that. The FBI does background investigations. In the case of a U.S. attorney, Janine Pirro, it has come to light that in a civil proceeding, that Fox News executives, prior to her confirmation, called her, I'm quoting here, a reckless maniac who makes, quote, insane comments, and said, I don't trust her to be responsible, and noted her penchant for what they called random conspiracy theories on weird internet sites. My question to you is, did that turn up in her background investigation?
For any background investigation, Senator, we do not discuss those publicly. And for every background investigation, when there's an adjudication, it is not made by me. It is made by the career professionals who run the inspection division and background check system.
Do you know if that information was found? You see, we're an oversight body here, and there are really three possibilities here. One is that the FBI background investigation didn't find that stuff. That's worth noting because these investigations, full field background investigations, are supposed to find that stuff. That's possibility one. Possibility two is that the FBI did in fact find that information and then did not report it to the administration or to the committee. And the third is that you found it, you reported it to the administration, and they went ahead with her nomination knowing that she had been described as a reckless maniac who made insane comments, who wasn't trusted by colleagues to be responsible, and who had a penchant for random conspiracy theories on weird internet sites. Are you saying that this committee does not have any authority or reason to look into which of those things is true?
This committee can look into anything it wishes. I'm telling you that the background investigations that are done by the HRD division are done by career individuals. They do not report the details of those to me. They adjudicate those independently and individually. That's how it's always been done.
What happened to during the pause of FBI background investigations that was alleged in the complaint against you and the FBI by the FBI agents who were terminated? On February 12th, Emil Bovee directed the FBI, quote, to pause any FBI background investigations of Trump nominees until Patel was confirmed, which happened on February 20th, is the general description of what they alleged. Why, do you know, were background investigations paused? Was it so material like this could be scrubbed out of them? And have they been resumed without that pause fully and normally after your arrival on February 20th?
I can speak to the time period since I got there. Background investigations have been ongoing across the board at the FBI.
Why was the pause, do you know?
I was not there.
Wasn't explained to you when you got there? Oh, by the way, boss, they've had an 8-day pause on background investigations. You think that would be something that would be explained to you at some point?
Again, I leave it to the men and women at the HRD division to run background investigations. I do not interfere with them.
I get that. But what I don't get is whether you were told about that pause, and why would you not be told about that pause?
I don't recall that, sir.
All right. The allegation also relates that part of the employee review of senior staff was whether or not they voted for Kamala Harris in the 2024 election. Since when is who you voted for a proper question for agents to be asked?
I don't know what allegation you're referring to, Senator. If it's from an ongoing matter in litigation, I can't discuss that. But what I can discuss is I can only speak to the FBI's background investigations. There are other background investigations conducted across the government. I can only speak to mine.
So just to clarify, I'm not talking about the FBI full field background investigations. I'm talking about internal employee reviews for promotion, for termination, for job actions of various kinds. And my question to you is it now the policy of the FBI to ask agents who they voted for, and since when is who agents voted for a proper question for the FBI to ask?
Taking those in reverse order, it's not a proper question, and it's improper to allege that I'm doing that. And also, at the FBI specifically, under my leadership, we do not ask who you voted for. And just one correction for the record, if I may, Senator, it's Security Division that runs background investigations, not HRD.
Okay. I'll accept that correction. And in the event that we cannot locate your grand jury transcript, just expect a question for the record that will give you the chance to either provide that transcript again if it had been previously provided, or to make the statement that Grand Jury Rule 6E allows you, to the best of your recollection, truthfully, about what it is that you told that grand jury. Do you understand that?
That's why I wanted the transcript released, and we'll get it to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
I think I want to take an opportunity when we hear about your political weaponization to remind my Democratic colleagues that what's happened the last decade, federal law enforcement, intelligence community, even when Trump was president, has thrown everything at him. They've even gone after his associates and Republican Party organizations. One investigation after another, one prosecution after another. I use examples you've heard me already say today, Crossfire Hurricane and Arctic Frost. These were all built on defective foundations of political bias. And then we released the Clinton Index and the Durham Index and the FBI's failures to investigate. So I've been acquainted with this because I've been trying to get to the bottom of it, and we had to get a new FBI director to get all White House.
Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Bondi, good morning.
Good morning.
What became of the $50,000 in cash that the FBI paid to Mr. Homan in a paper bag, evidently?
Senator, as Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche recently stated, the investigation of Mr. Homan was subjected to a full review by the FBI, agents, and DOJ prosecutors. They found no credible evidence of any wrongdoing.
And that was not my question. My question was, what became of the $50,000 in cash that the FBI delivered, evidently in a paper bag, to Mr. Homan?
Senator, I'd look at your facts.
Are you saying that they did not deliver $50,000 in cash to Mr. Homan?
Senator, as recently stated, the investigation of Mr. Homan was subjected to a full
A different
review
question.
by the FBI agents,
That's a
by
different
Department
question.
of Justice prosecutors. They found no evidence of wrongdoing.
That's a different question. What became of the $50,000? Did the FBI get it back?
Mr. Whitehouse, excuse me, Senator Whitehouse, you're welcome to talk to the FBI.
The report to you, can't you answer this question?
Senator Whitehouse, you're welcome to discuss this with Director Patel.
Did Homan keep the $50,000?
As Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche recently stated, the investigation of Mr.
Never mind.
Homan
I can
was
see I'm not going to get a
subject
straight
to full
answer from you
review
to a very simple
by
question.
the FBI agents and the DOJ.
Do
They
you
found
know-
no credible evidence of wrongdoing. You know, you're very concerned about money and people taking money, and
Do
you
you
rail
know-
against
wait a
dark
second,
money.
wait a second, wait a
Yet you
second,
work with dark
wait a
money
second.
groups all the time, Senator
Wait a
Whitehouse.
second. Did you know whether or not in that investigation they looked at whether the $50,000 payment to Mr. Homan was declared by him on his tax returns?
Senator, I would be more concerned if I were you when you talk about corruption and money, that when you pushed for legislation that would subsidize your wife's company.
The questions here are actually pretty specific. So having you respond with completely irrelevant far-right internet talking points really is not very helpful here. I'd like, Mr. Chairman, you generally like to have us be able to get answers to know, and we'll follow up with the QFR. And to the extent Patel wants to answer, that would be great as well. What happened to the $50,000? Did Homan keep it? Did the FBI get it back? If he kept it, did he put it on his tax returns? Pretty simple questions. Homan was the same guy who said there was a deal with Eric Adams. He said, if Adams doesn't come through, I'll be back. I'll be in his office, up his butt, saying, where the hell is the agreement we came to? Which brings us to the OPR investigation of prosecutorial misconduct by Emil Bovee, because he was also involved in that transaction. Yeah. What became of the OPR investigation of prosecutorial misconduct by Emil Bovee?
Yeah, Senator Whitehouse, to correct you for one moment, that would be the Honorable Judge Emil J. Bovee III to you.
Not at the time of this. He was an employee of the Department of Justice. And what became of the OPR investigation?
It's all pending litigation,
misconduct?
Senator. I can't discuss pending litigation nor personnel matters.
OPR customarily publicly says when there's an investigation, and at the end of it, they provide a summary. Why can't you say whether there's an OPR investigation and whether, if it's concluded, there's a summary?
Senator, I'm not going to discuss personnel matters.
Even public ones.
Senator, I'm not going to discuss personnel matters.
So, Kash Patel told this committee that his grand jury testimony after immunization, after initially pleading the Fifth, was, and I quote, sealed by the Department of Justice. How and when and why was his testimony sealed, and by whom?
Senator, I'm not going to discuss any testimony, especially testimony that could be sealed with you.
No, the question is, was it or was it not sealed?
Senator, I'm not going to discuss that with you.
Well, he also said that he worked with the Department of Justice to have his transcript released publicly. How and when was his transcript released? Presumably, if he released it publicly, that's something you can discuss because it's public.
Well, Senator, I believe you discussed that with Director Patel.
And I'm asking you because he said the Department of Justice made this decision and you run the Department of Justice.
I would refer that to Director Patel.
Even though you run the Department of Justice and he testified that the Department of Justice released his transcript publicly.
If it is released publicly, we will get you a copy, Senator, gladly.
If being a rather important word there, when your FBI director testified that that was a fact. Treasury compiles suspicious activity reports, referred to often as SARs, that DOJ receives automatically. Hundreds related to accounts of Jeffrey Epstein. How many of those Treasury SARs did you or Director Patel investigate?
Senator, I'm not sure if you're concerned because you took money, I believe, did you, from Reid Hoffman, one of Epstein's closest confidants, not only once but twice in 2018 and 2024, if that's correct. But, Senator, did you ask Merrick Garland any of this over the last 4 years when he sat before you? This investigation has been going on. This investigation was closed. Did you ask Alex Acosta that?
And Patel came to office, you said you would look into this. There were hundreds of suspicious activity reports. Some people would deduce from the fact that they are called suspicious activity reports that there might be suspicious activity. And yet you seem to have looked at 0 of those suspicious activity reports involving Jeffrey Epstein accounts. Let me ask you something else. There's been public reporting that Jeffrey Epstein showed people photos of President Trump with half-naked young women. Do you know if the FBI found those photographs in their search of Jeffrey Epstein's safe or premises or otherwise? Have you seen any such thing?
You know, Senator Whitehouse, you sit here and make salacious remarks, once again trying to slander President Trump left and right, when you're the one who was taking money from one of Epstein's closest confidants, I believe, I could be wrong, correct me, Reid Hoffman, who was with Jeffrey Epstein on multiple occasions. And the senator sitting right next to you tried to block the flight logs from being released. Yet you're grilling me on President Trump and some photograph with Epstein? Come on.
The question is, did the FBI find those photographs that have been discussed publicly by a witness who claimed Jeffrey Epstein showed them to him? You don't know anything about that. Okay. Here's what well, no, we cut to something else. The Marshal Service is supposed to protect our federal judges. I have asked repeatedly for the Marshal Service to let me know if they are investigating or being inhibited from investigating whether or not there is orchestration of threats against federal judges, whether under either conspiracy laws or racketeering enterprise laws or aiding and abetting laws, whatever. But as you know, there's the person who says the threat, and then there may very well be somebody orchestrating the threat behind them. Is the Marshal Service allowed to investigate orchestration of threats, and do you know if they've taken one step to do so?
May I answer the question, Chairman Grassley? The time has expired.
I think it's the convention of the committee that if I've started my question in my time, you may answer the question.
I was asking the chairman.
Okay, before I go to Cornyn.
She wants to answer the question, Chairman.
Oh, please go ahead. I thought you said you didn't want to answer it. I'm
Yes, sir.
sorry.
Thank you. Senator Whitehouse, I would be happy to sit down with you regarding any threat to any federal judge in this country. We take threats very seriously. I will set a meeting with you, with Director Serralta of the U.S. Marshals, and I will be there. And we will talk about any threats on federal judges.
Including
who
orchestration.
threatened them or who orchestrated them.
Bingo, thank you.
Okay, before Cornyn speaks, I get kind of amused about my Democratic colleagues bringing up Treasury suspicious activity reports regarding Epstein. When Senator Johnson and I issued our Biden family reports in 2020, we used information from these very same type of documents. And you know what? We were criticized by our Democratic colleagues for doing so, and for years they ignored the evidence of the Biden family criminality.